You were there, you were the main character. The room, the lights, the first breath, the first sound you ever heard outside the womb, the first face you ever saw, the first time air hit your skin, and you remember none of it, not a single second. Most people never even think about this because the answer seems obvious. You were a newborn, your brain wasn't developed enough. End of story. But that's not the answer, not even close, because here's what nobody tells you. Your brain at birth was already firing, already processing, already recording. Newborns recognize their mother's voice within hours, and they prefer it over every other sound on earth. They learned it inside the womb, so your brain was working. It was taking everything in. The memories were forming. And then something erased them, all of them, every single one. And the real reason why is far stranger than you think. Let's go back to the very beginning, not your birth, before it. You spent 280 days inside a dark, warm, liquid world. You had no eyes that could focus, no lungs that could breathe, but you had ears. By week 18 of pregnancy, your auditory system was already active. You were listening. By week 28, you could distinguish your mother's voice from all other sounds. You were building your first map of the world from inside it. And then, on the day you were born, everything changed in an instant. The pressure, the cold, the light, the noise. Researchers at the University of Florida in 2013 measured cortisol levels in newborns during birth. Cortisol is your stress hormone. And what they found was extraordinary. A newborn's cortisol levels during delivery are among the highest ever recorded in any human being at any point in their life, higher than combat soldiers, higher than patients in surgical emergencies. Your birth was, neurologically speaking, the most stressful event you will ever experience, and you remember none of it. Why? The first clue came from a researcher who wasn't even studying babies. In 1994, neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux at New York University published a landmark study on fear and memory. He had spent years mapping how the brain processes traumatic experiences, and he discovered something nobody expected. The brain has two completely separate memory systems, two different filing systems running at the same time. The first is explicit memory. This is the one you know, the one that records facts, events, moments you can replay in your mind. The one that says, I was there, this happened, I remember. Second is implicit memory. This one runs underneath, it records feelings, reflexes, bodily responses. It doesn't create stories, it creates reactions. And here's the critical part. These two systems develop at completely different speeds. Your implicit memory system is fully operational at birth. The moment you arrive, it is already recording, already learning fear, already learning comfort, already learning your mother's smell. But your explicit memory system, the one that would let you remember being born, isn't even close to ready. It won't be ready for years, but that's only half the story. In 2012, neuroscientist Christina Alberini at New York University ran a series of experiments that changed everything. She was studying infant rats whose brains develop on roughly the same timeline as human infants. She taught them to fear a specific sound, a tone that predicted a mild electric shock. The infant rats learned immediately. Their implicit memory worked perfectly. They froze when they heard the tone, their bodies remembered. But when she tested them weeks later, the equivalent of several years in human development, the fear was gone. Not reduced, gone. Their explicit memory had never formed. So Alberini did something extraordinary. She looked inside their brains and she found that the infant rats had formed memories, real memories, encoded memories, but something had come along and actively erased them. Not passively, actively, and the culprit was the last thing anyone expected. The brain has a mechanism called memory erasure. It sounds like science fiction, but it's real, and in infants, it runs at full power. In 2014, neuroscientist Paul Frankland at the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto published a study in the journal Science. He had been studying a process called neurogenesis, the creation of new brain cells. In adults, neurogenesis is slow. Your brain adds perhaps 700 new neurons per day in the hippocampus. The hippocampus is your brain's memory center, the region that converts experiences into lasting memories. But in infants, neurogenesis is not slow, it is explosive. In the first months of life, your hippocampus was producing new neurons at a rate that dwarfs anything your adult brain can manage. Thousands per day, building the circuits you would use for the rest of your life. And here is where it gets strange. Franklin discovered that every time a new neuron integrates into an existing circuit, it disrupts the connections already there. The connections that were holding your memories, your brain was building itself, and in doing so, it was destroying everything it had recorded. Not because it was broken, because it was growing too fast. Franklin tested this directly when he slowed neurogenesis in infant mice. They remembered things far longer than normal infant mice. When he artificially increased neurogenesis in adult mice, they started forgetting things they had already learned. The conclusion was brutal in its simplicity. You can't remember being born because the brain that recorded it no longer exists. It was dismantled, neuron by neuron, rebuilt into something new, into you. But there's another layer, and it might be the strangest part of all. Even if your hippocampus had been ready, even if neurogenesis hadn't erased everything, you still couldn't remember being born because of something far more fundamental, something you didn't have yet, a self. In 1972, psychologist Gordon Gallup Jr. at Tulane University designed one of the most elegant experiments in the history of psychology. He placed a mirror in front of a chimpanzee. At first, the chimp reacted as if seeing another animal. It threatened the reflection. It tried to play with it, but after a few days, something changed. The chimp began using the mirror to inspect its own body, to examine its own teeth, its own face. It had recognized itself. Gallup called this the mirror test, and it became the gold standard for measuring self-awareness. When researchers applied the same test to human infants, the results were striking. Before 15 months of age, no infant passes the mirror test. They look at the reflection like a stranger. They reach toward it. They try to interact with it. They have no idea it is them. After 18 to 24 months, something shifts. The infant reaches for their own face. They understand. The person in the mirror is me. And this is the moment, not birth, not months later, but this exact developmental threshold that corresponds to the earliest age at which autobiographical memories can form. Because autobiographical memory requires a narrator, a me at the center of the story. Without a self, there's no one to remember. There was no narrator at your birth, no you to be the main character. There were sensations, there were reactions, but there was no one home yet to file them away. There is one more piece. The piece that makes this stranger than anything else. In 2021, developmental psychologist Fabrice Gorin at the University of Bordeaux published research on fetal memory. He found that fetuses can form memories as early as 30 weeks of pregnancy. Not just sound recognition, actual memory traces, patterns that persist, which means you were forming memories before you were even born, inside the womb, in the dark, in the liquid world you lived in for 9 months, and those memories are gone too. Every single one. The sound of your mother's heartbeat that you heard for 280 days. The rhythm you knew better than anything in the world. Gone. The muffled voices. The pressure. Changes. The warmth. All of it erased before you even had a chance to hold on. We spend our lives trying to understand who we are, where we came from, what made us, and the answer begins in a place we cannot reach, in a room we were in a moment we lived through completely, and forgot before we even knew we were forgetting. The person who was born that day, who felt everything for the first time, who heard your mother's voice and recognized it immediately, is not you, not anymore. That person was taken apart, quietly, completely, and rebuilt into someone new, someone who would spend the rest of their life wondering where they came from. You were there, you just can't go back. If this changed the way you see yourself, there's more where that came from. Subscribe, because the next one starts even earlier than you think.